Talking Husker football here at the Voice of College Football. We got Adam Carriker on the live. If you know anything about college football, don't even need to be a Nebraska fan. You've watched this guy play. Definitely Nebraska Football Hall of Fame, 7 years in the NFL, Redskins and Rams. Adam, how you doing today, man?
I'm glorious. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. And, just to see some of the years next to your name brings back, okay, this is where Nebraska football was 15, 20, 25 years ago. You walked on campus in 2003. Here we are 20 years later. You just missed a period of obviously Tom Osborne hanging it up a couple years earlier. Frank Solich was in play. He went to a BCS championship game. He certainly posted a great record there at Nebraska. You jump on board. What do you think it's like for a Nebraska athlete that has just signed with the program in 2023 and what they encounter versus the glory days and what you walked into 20 years ago?
Oh man, it's obviously very different. When I walked on campus, the expectation at the time was 9 wins, compete for conference titles, potentially things beyond that. There was a certain level of expectation. They were fresh off the Rose Bowl, didn't go great against Miami, but nonetheless, I think they finished a top 5 team the year before. They were number 1 a lot of the season. And so there were still those high expectations. The first, I was there under Frank for a couple, 3 years, Coach Solich, and he was a really good coach. Obviously, he got let go. And then ever since then, just changed the identity, changed a lot of things, been trying to kind of re-find ourselves for, better part of 2 decades at this point. So hopefully we got a guy in there, Matt Rule. He wants to play physical football. He wants to run the ball. He wants to be physical up front. He wants to develop players. I don't know, seemed like a magical formula that might work at a certain place for 40 years. Getting back to that sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, you bring up toughness, and it's a sport that's not a contact sport; it's a collision sport. So we've taken that out of the rules in many ways. The spread offenses has spaced things out and made it less physical, but it still has to start with that. And we got the term black shirts, and that black shirts that has not gone away. They still reward black shirts to defensive players and the defensive team, but it's not the black shirts that you grew up in. So you guys obviously took pride in being physical and keeping teams out of the end zone.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's funny because no matter what you do to the game of football, unless you decide just to go full flag with like the Pro Bowl did, at the end of the day, the game's going to be one in the trenches 9 times out of 10. I mean, you can have a great quarterback, but if he's on his back, what's he going to do? You can have a great running back, but if there's nowhere to go, where's he going to go? I mean, only Barry Sanders could have the success that he had without phenomenal offensive lines in front of him. He's a once-in-a-lifetime talent. And so defensively, if you're getting after the quarterback, maybe the DBs cover great. Maybe they don't. It doesn't matter. If you can get pressure up front, there might be somewhere to run for the running back. There might not. So it all starts up front. As far as the black shirts, it's one of those things where for me, it was a mentality. It was a pride. It meant more to try to get it. It meant more to once you earned it, to keep it. It meant more to represent it. At least I feel like to me, it meant a lot anyways. And I feel like there's certain guys to this day that it still means a lot, but I don't know that it's universally thought of as the same. And so hopefully we can get back to that and representing what a black shirt means. Not every play is going to go your way, but that's okay. You get back up, you hit them in the mouth, and you hit them in the mouth again, and until they don't want to be hit in the mouth no more. And then hopefully in the fourth quarter, they just don't want none, and you're still going. To me, that was always kind of what the black shirt mentality represented, regardless of what the scoreboard said.
A lot of what you bring up there, I got to think is of course physical, but it's also mental. So at the foundation of a program, people look at a head coach, and obviously he's the guy running the show and he's the most important guy on campus, but strength and conditioning, this is the program that made that a thing and obviously built the foundation of championships, just being stronger and leaning and wearing on teams in the fourth quarter. And to get back to that is going to be huge, I would think.
Yeah, so I've interviewed Boyd Epley, man, the godfather of strength and conditioning in football. And he's told me, when he started, it was thought to be a bad thing by a lot of people to lift. You were going to become stiff and unflexible, and you weren't going to be athletic anymore. And when Osborne approached Devaney about having this track athlete, Boyd Epley, start having Nebraska football players work out, Devaney wasn't uber receptive. Now, I don't want to say luckily, but you could say luckily they just come off a couple of rough seasons because it made Devaney more willing to go out on a limb and try something that insanely positively affected Nebraska football going forward. You know, I could argue 70 and 71, maybe they do, maybe they don't win those championships. You know, that LSU game in the Orange Bowl, that was a great game, the game of the century in 71. Maybe Oklahoma wins if we don't have the advantage in the weight room that we have. And then obviously going forward after that. So it was interesting because Epley, you know, after talking to Osborne, who talked to Devaney, basically Devaney said, if this doesn't work out, I'm firing both of you. So luckily it worked out, not just from a strength and conditioning standpoint, but getting Osborne to be our head coach for a quarter of a century turned out to be a pretty good thing too.
Yeah, he did pretty well. Now looking at Matt Rule, you made the comment a few minutes ago about hopefully we've got the guy. The easy look at his resume is, okay, he goes to Temple. Here's where Temple is. This is where he got him. Baylor, another place. Boom. 1-10, 1-11. Boom. This is where he got him within a few years. So that looks good. There's no question about that. And if he's good enough to get an NFL job, regardless of how things worked out there. So they haven't played a game. He hasn't proven anything, but the track record's great. And based on, you know, I hate to put a lot on, you know, news conferences during spring practice and all of that, because everybody sounds good. But this guy, he does sound a little different. He's a little bit more unique about the way he talks about football players, and football players are people, and we invest in them as people. And a lot of things he said is really not coach speak. It's a little bit beyond that.
It was interesting because after he was hired, I don't think I've ever watched more videos of a man or done a deeper dive online of a man that I have Matt Rule. You know, it's part of my job, but I felt a little awkward, but I'm like, I got to educate myself on this guy a whole lot more than I currently know. You know, I was aware of Temple and Baylor and the Panthers and all that, but I wanted to know more. And so I watched, you know, I watched him speak at men's conferences, not even just to the media or football players or team meetings like Dion's been doing quite a bit. And I came away thinking, man, this guy, he seems to get it. And when he did that first press conference, I was like, all right, he's going to win the day at the press conference. He knows how to do public speaking. So I was kind of like, no matter what he says, I'm not going to get overly excited. I don't care. I'm not buying in right away. I bought in. I mean, he still won me over somehow. It didn't matter. I think what kind of sets him apart is he's not overly direct, but he's honest at the same time. So he's not going to hit you in the face with it so it comes across in a negative manner, but it doesn't come across as BS straight up coach speak, because he's still being honest with you. After the first day of spring practice, he goes, yeah, I'm not sure how good we are yet. I see this, and I see that. And there was a lot of positivity, but then I don't know how good we are yet. You know, so there's honesty behind what he has to say. And like I mentioned before, what he wants to do is what Nebraska fans want to see, a formula that worked for a long time. I know it's not going to be exactly the same, but there's so much similarity that, and I think Nebraska fans, you know, the previous coach didn't go great. You know, it was supposed to be the home run hire, didn't go phenomenal. So I think some fans, including myself, are a little reticent to completely buy in. But it's hard not to get excited when you hear what he has to say, how he says it, because I say it's not what you say, it's how you say it 90% of the time, and then what he's actually doing. So it's hard not to get excited.
And obviously, it's a landscape in the Big Ten Western Division, and we're only going to have this for one more year. So everything's going to change, USC, UCLA, and who knows what kind of format there's going to have with pods or the entire conference together. But just looking at this particular season, yes, Wisconsin's always been better. They've typically been the best program in the division. Iowa's been right there. But Nebraska, even during this 5 or 6 year stretch, continually plays games where they're right there, week after week after week, not just against them, but against the best teams in the conference, Ohio State and Michigan. So you've been there in the fourth quarter of games that could have gone either way. And whether it's a physical thing or a mental thing, like, here we go again, we're going to drop this one, or here we go again, we'll make the play. We'll do it. Somebody's going to make this happen. I'll make it happen if I need to. You know, talk about that psychological edge or disadvantage.
So like you mentioned, it's a little bit of both. Physically, if you're in better shape in the fourth quarter, that's going to give you an obvious physical advantage. That's first and foremost. You're going to be a little bit stronger, a little bit faster because you're less tired. So that's an advantage. Mentally, it's interesting because you think back to Michael Jordan. Couldn't get past the Pistons, the bad boy Pistons, and they beat him up and they shoved him around. So he started lifting. And then finally, once he broke through, he won 3. Obviously, does the baseball thing, comes back and wins 3 more. A lot of times getting that first big win, that first tough win. Michigan doesn't beat Ohio State for about 40 million years, and now they beat them twice in a row. They're not more talented. They're just better in the fourth quarter. I mean, if you think back to that Michigan-Ohio State game last year with about 8-9 minutes to go, it was 1 score, and then Michigan ran away with it. So right now, Ohio State, they don't have to overcome a physical deficit. They got to overcome a mental deficit right now with Michigan, which 2 years ago was flipped the other way. So if we can get that one breakthrough, that one big win, that fourth quarter comeback, that fourth quarter close game win, especially if it's a bigger name program, that could project us going forward. But you got to get that first one. That first one's always the toughest.
Competition's a good thing, Adam, of course. But it looked like Casey Thompson was just going to be the man. Now they bring in Jeff Sims, and we've got a little quarterback battle, and we've got 2 different styles of quarterbacks to a certain extent. Do you have a feel for the way the offense is going to be run and who might have the advantage and how this may play out?
Oh, man, at this point, it's a bit of a guessing game. Obviously, Sims is going to do a few more things with his legs. He's got the capability of throwing the ball. He's thrown a few more INTs than Casey has. Casey has a little better passer, a little more of a pure passer. And I mean, he's honestly a better runner than people give him credit for. I don't know that he wants to run first necessarily. So I know Rule wants to run the ball. I know he wants to be physical up front. Obviously, Casey is out for the spring with the shoulder injury, so that's going to give Sims some extra reps. So maybe that helps him going into the fall. I tell you what, as a Nebraska fan, I mean, it's been about 4 or 5 seasons since we haven't had a starting quarterback miss a game or multiple games in the season. So the prospect of having 2, if they both stick around, potentially 2 good quarterbacks excites me a lot. As far as who has the inside track, I mean, I don't know at this point. Casey is going to give you more options throwing the ball. So if you want to threaten the defense through the air as well as on the ground, Casey's going to give you that. I know Rule wants to run the ball. I know he wants to be physical up front. Maybe that gives the edge to Sims if he doesn't mind running the ball a little bit more. But I'm willing to bet that this quarterback battle goes pretty deep into fall camp.
Hey, Adam, whether you want to target individual players on both sides of the ball or units, who do you think this is more of an important spring for? Are there particular places where you're looking?
Oh, yeah, you got to start with the offensive line. And we have highly recruited guys. We have talented guys. We have guys with size and ability, yet we have not played well up front for quite a while. I'm going to avoid saying specific names. Most Husker fans can probably figure it out. But we've got size. We got talent. We brought back Raiola, the offensive line coach, and that was a surprise to a lot of people. If you're around him, he's an enamoring guy. He's a guy that the players like playing for, and they wanted him to come back. And he's a guy that I think Matt Rule really likes. And he sees a future with him and the way he can coach. And even so, I played against Donovan at the St. Louis Rams in practice and again with the Redskins Commanders. Okay. And so I've gone against him in practice. And, you know, when we went back to a practice last fall with the fam, he was one of the first guys to come over, say hi, how you doing? Like, I can see why he was a little bit more quiet as a player. As a coach, obviously, he's going to be a little bit more vocal. I can see why players flock to him. He's always been a good dude, but now he's a good dude with a little bit more vocality to it. Just made up a word there. Hope that makes sense. And so the offensive line, I think, is the quarterback, but we've only got one quarterback between Sims and Thompson. Not that there aren't other quarterbacks in that room that are able to do spring ball right now. So that'll be more of a fall camp thing. For me, it's offensive line. And then I think people are just curious, 3-3-5. How's it going to work in general? What's it going to look like? How many, because they've talked about putting 4 down at times. How many times is it going to be 3-3-5? And what are these exotic blitzes going to look like? And how many times are we going to go 4 down? So to me, it's O-line, and then it's just 3-3-5 as a whole. What's it going to look like?
Get Adam Carriker on the line. Carriker Chronicles, Carriker Live, the Big Ten show. Let people know the best place to find you and find all your platforms.
So we're a little bit in transition right now. So the Carriker Chronicles is going out on its own. So it's probably not going to make a return until August. I don't want to say it's my baby, but it's something I've been doing for a long time. So I'm being a little particular and patient with how things unfold. That's why it's not the Chronicles banner behind me. It's Carriker Live, which is another Sunday night show that I do, basically a spinoff of Carriker Chronicles. But that'll probably return August 1st is kind of my target date, and I want to set up some interviews. But YouTube, there's going to be a Carriker Chronicles YouTube channel, and then Facebook and Twitter as well. Eventually, I have an email list. I'm not promoting it just yet because we're getting everything organized, but people can sign up there and make sure they don't miss anything.
So, Adam, got you here to talk Nebraska football, but I'm too much of an NFL nerd, especially at the time that you played. I've kind of lost a little bit. I'm the guy that knew all the rosters and transactions. Now I just have time to watch the red zone on Sunday afternoon. I don't have time to keep up with the rest of that. But at the time that you were on the field, yeah, I knew everybody. And so I got to hit you up with a few things that are just personal interest items. So for your time in the NFL, who was the toughest offensive lineman, let's say left tackle, right tackle, that you had to run into?
So for me, I grew up watching Larry Allen. I was well aware who he was on those Dallas Cowboy teams, Super Bowl champs. I was well aware of his 800-pound bench press. I had watched that online, when I was younger. And so first game I played was against the Panthers. The second game was against the 49ers, and it was Larry Allen was the guard. I'll never forget in practice that week, Coach Hazlitt, our D coordinator, comes up to me and just goes, "Larry Allen, huh?" and just walks away. I was like, "You a-hole." And, this is not really inspiring to your rookie who's starting his first game ever at a brand new position. So he was everything I thought he was. He was just as mean and nasty too. He's one of two guys that sticks out as got an extra gear of mean and nasty and finishing to and through the whistle. And one of the first plays, it was a pass, and I'm pass rushing against him, and they get the ball off quick. And as I'm running downfield, he shouted a few things at me that I may not repeat here, but I'm like 15 yards away. And I'm like, why are you yelling at me when I'm 15 yards away? So that first game, we played him twice that year. He definitely won the battle. I was used to relying on my strength, and that was not a man. And that was my first experience going against a man. I was not going to win the strength battle. So I had to make some adjustments for the second time that we played. But that first game, he definitely introduced himself in a physical way and a vocal way, and he's a heck of a player. Definitely one of the toughest ever to play the game.
Suiting up for the Rams and the Redskins, definitely two proud franchises that have had their high points, but not necessarily when you were there.
Thanks for pointing that out.
I'm sorry. That just came out, and then I thought,
it's all good.
Something I should be bringing up here?
No,
but hey, it's a team game. You can only do so much, and you had a nice run in the NFL, no doubt about
Thank
that.
you.
Something that 99.9999% of us will never encounter, and should in any way just be like, wow, that dude's for real.
It's all good. It's all good.
What he did. So definitely. So just high points, low points, disappointments, big moments that you will always cherish from your days in the NFL?
Oh, man. High point, being drafted. That day is still a blur. One regret I have from that day, I got the call and I was on the phone for like an hour. And then they're like, yeah, by the way, in 2 hours, your flight leaves to head to St. Louis, which was awesome. Except I had to go straight to the airport. I never really got to celebrate with my parents. So that was something that kind of bothered me. Exciting day, a whirlwind. And then I looked back at it, a couple of days later, I was like, oh man, I didn't really get to celebrate that like I had liked. My first year in the league was fun learning a brand new position. It was unique to my body type, but I had fun learning it. For me, the day I got traded to DC Has actually went from the Rams to DC, my D coordinator. He had called me about a month before. He's like, we're trying to trade for you. I was like, okay, that's awesome. I'm out walking my dogs. I still remember like the visuals of where we were in the neighborhood and the dog pulling on the leash. And I go, okay, that's cool. He goes, why won't they trade you? I was like, I don't know. I didn't know you were trading for me. Well, they ended up trading me for a donut and a cup of coffee anyway. So they must not have asked for a big enough donut or something. So anyways, getting that news was a surprise and a shock. Because again, 3 hours later, I was on a flight to DC. And I've never been back to St. Louis since. My wife and in-laws ended up selling the house, taking care of all that good stuff, so I could get acclimated with the team. So being drafted, being traded, there's highs and lows to all of that. When I was in DC, there wasn't, honestly, there wasn't a ton of expectations at first. And the guy that I was battling with was a fan favorite, and he was a good dude, 15-year NFL vet. I ended up beating him out. He's a great player, good friend to this day. But I ended up beating him out, and then I ended up earning a solid second contract, which to me was a kind of validation. Like, hey, maybe new home, new spot, new opportunity is just what you needed. And so for me, there was ups and downs. But the biggest lesson I took, it doesn't matter, if you feel like you're winning the day, losing the day. Winners get back up off the ground and they keep going. Losers, I don't want to say losers, but people who aren't going to win as much don't. And winners, even if they feel like they're winning, they're going to keep learning and trying to get better. And so those were some of my biggest takeaways. And I have no problem talking about some of the ups, some of the downs. It's helped shape me into the person I am today. I have this friend of mine. We're close enough that he can be brutally honest with me. He looks at me out of nowhere one day. He goes, "Hey, Adam, you're almost famous." And walks away. I was like, "You are right." Like, I'm not, but in his words, it was like, almost. I was like, you know what? I appreciate that honesty and I have fun with it. So it's one of those things where I embrace everything that happened. And I think hopefully it helps make me a better human being going forward.
What kind of puts this all together is obviously Matt Rule and this Nebraska coaching staff. One of the big draws to going to any big brand in college football is, are they going to prepare me for the NFL? So for you, obviously, there's got to be talent. There's got to be supreme talent there to a certain extent, because if you're the 13th pick in the NFL draft, that's up there. But there was obviously coaching, influence, development, a lot of things. How do you think it all came together for you? And at what point did you realize, hey, I'm pretty good at this? Like, I knew I was good, but I'm really good at this, and I got a big opportunity here. And what were all the ingredients, do you think, that made you the player you were to set you up to be a first rounder?
So my dream growing up was to play at Nebraska. And long story short, I was a quarterback. I didn't even play defense till my senior year of high school. And so most teams were recruiting me as a quarterback. I didn't like quarterback. If I was going to throw, I was going to go play baseball where I was a pitcher. I'm like, if I'm going to play a sport where you're hitting, I'm going to go hit somebody, be the hitter or not the hittee. So I transitioned to DN my senior year, and immediately Oregon pulled their offer. And Washington never even called me, the state I grew up in. And Nebraska looked at me dead in the eye and said, "You're not good enough to play here." And so I was really questioning, like, oh, should I just go back to quarterback? And my dad was like, "Do you want to play quarterback?" I was like, "No." "You want to play defensive end?" "Yeah." "Well, then go play defensive end and see what you can make happen." So anyways, I finally ended up getting an offer from Nebraska. Long story short, so that was my dream coming true. The NFL wasn't even on my radar, simply because, can this guy even play college ball? That was the first question. So my junior year, after the first 4 games, I had 4 sacks. And an article came out in the paper. Adam's going to declare at the end of the season for the NFL draft, which blew me away. I thought that was insanely interesting because I wanted to know who his source was, because I hadn't even thought about the NFL at that point. I was like, I started as a sophomore, but I'm finally doing some of the things in games that I'd been able to do in practices, and it wasn't even on my radar. So the end of my junior year, the time came to make a decision. I was a projected first-round pick, so I called my dad. Long story short, I ended up coming back. And then my senior, obviously, I went out and got drafted. But for me, I was driven so hard to prove people who doubted me wrong. Even more importantly, the few people I felt like, anyways, I wanted to prove them right. And so I lifted, I ran hard. I mean, I wouldn't recommend this, but there's a couple times, I puked all over the field. One time I got gaitored off the field because I ran with the DBs, and that wasn't a brilliant move. And I was just so driven to play and prove I could play at that major D1 level. I don't want to say the NFL just kind of happened, but it's like I tell my son, he's 13, he's in 7th grade. He tells me all the time, and I'm happy, but I want to keep it in perspective. He's like, "Dad, I want to play Michigan." That's where he wants to play. I failed as a father. He wants to play at Michigan, or he likes Oregon or Nebraska. Those are his top 3, and he's constantly talking about these things. And I'm like, "Jacob, that's awesome, but you don't put a bunch of pressure on yourself. There's a difference between motivation and pressure. So if you focus on being the best 7th grade football player you can be, and the best middle school football player you can be, and then in high school, be the best high school player you can be, it keeps things in perspective. And it also gives you the best opportunity to reach these dreams without putting a bunch of pressure on yourself. So it almost kind of helped me that the NFL was an afterthought because I had no pressure. I was just trying to play where I was at. So it kind of took the pressure off of me. I hope that makes sense. Long-winded answer. Sorry about that. But now I'm trying to help my son with, you know, what his goals are, but yet keeping it realistic and all in perspective with motivation, but not pressure.
Oh, I think it's phenomenal because it reminds me of a conversation I just had with my son today. Keep the nose to the grindstone, one day at a time, one day at a time. Sure, there's a time maybe every so often, once a month or something, to kind of reflect and be like, yeah, this is where I want to be down the road. But that's your everyday process. No, you're not going anywhere. You got to be in the moment, working hard every day. No doubt about that. Yeah, you mentioned playing high school football in Washington, correct? State
Yep.
of Washington. And so tying this back to Nebraska, currently, again, incredible fan base. I could ask you about that as well. We've seen Florida State down, Texas down, various places down, and you see empty seats. Well, you don't see that at Nebraska. Just the loyalty's crazy. And if we checked off all the boxes, especially in this new world of NIL, they've done a lot to get ahead of the curve there. They got the resources, they got the brand, the tradition, the history, the support, etc. But not a whole lot of football players within a couple 100 miles plus. Do you think that continues to be a problem? And, with USC and UCLA making this an even tougher conference, how they clear that hurdle?
So, yeah, I mean, I understand that Nebraska, the 4 states, what is there, probably 4 schools where you can go within an hour round your circle, a circle of your school, and you can probably get a top 10 class year after year, USC, Texas, probably Miami of Florida and Georgia. And it's much easier to recruit there. Everybody knows that. That's not a big shocker right there. But there's still good football players in Nebraska. I'm sick and tired of watching the Hawkeyes, and they got a defensive end throwing the bones in our stadium because he's from Omaha, and you got a defensive end out at Stanford who's a really good player, and you got tight ends and all these other positions that I'm watching in other schools. These guys should have been at Nebraska. And for me, every year, Nebraska has anywhere from 5 to 10, but usually about 5, 6, 7, 8 solid football players that can play Division I football and play at the University of Nebraska. They shouldn't be going elsewhere. We just signed 8 Nebraska guys this past class under Matt Rule, and that's the most amount of Nebraska guys Nebraska has signed in a recruiting class since 1998. So that can be almost a 30-year class every year. And Nebraska guys, anytime you're an in-state guy, it's no different if you're at Texas, California, Georgia, Ohio, whatever. In-state guys, they're probably going to be less likely to transfer, less likely to leave. They're going to stick it out a little bit longer. It probably means a little bit more to them. So I would always start in-state. And I know Husker fans, Husker media types talk about the 500-mile radius. That's cool too, and then whatever you need, then you can get speed from Florida, size from Texas. Maybe he's going to build that pipeline to Texas again. That'll sure be helpful. As far as USC, UCLA, I'm actually excited that they're joining because if you look at the Pac-12, they got California. You look at the Big 12, they got Texas. You look at the SEC, they got Florida and Texas with A&M. As far as recruiting grounds, you look at the ACC, they've got Florida. The Big Ten has none of those connections to any of those states. Now we do. And so to me, I would love to actually play. I don't know how they're going to do the schedule when they get rid of divisions. Maybe it'll be a pod type schedule like what the SEC is doing, the 3-6-6 or however they're going to do it. I don't know. I would love to play USC and UCLA every year. I know they're good teams, but now you get those California eyes on you all the time. And Florida, Texas, California, those are undeniably the top 3 recruiting states. And that's something that we haven't had. We haven't had our Texas connections. California, it'd be nice to get something to one of those 3 states. So for me, I see it as a benefit to the Big Ten.
Has this transition to the Big Ten, what was that, 2010, something in that range? They played in the last 2 Big 12 championships. This program was in a good place, not elite at that point, but in a really good place. I know Nebraska fans still can't believe 1 second on the clock against Texas, that whole deal. Yep. You're playing a team that could have won the national championship and you outplayed them. So they were that good at that point. They transitioned to the Big Ten. They make a couple Big Ten one Big Ten championship game. And so they were really good under Bo Pelini, but not being able to beat those better teams in the league. What do you think that transition to the Big Ten did? Do you think that had any impact on them not being as good for the next decade?
The Big Ten's a solid conference. There's no doubt about it. You can debate a step up from the Big 12. The more teams we add, especially teams like USC and UCLA, what Lincoln Riley's doing out there and Chip Kelly's trying to do out there, it only makes us stronger overall beyond just recruiting, but teams playing well. So no doubt the Big Ten was tougher. I think it was more about the issues. I don't want to say at the top, but we haven't had a successful coach at Nebraska, regardless of the conference, in quite a while. And unless we played in a non-Power 5 league, I don't know that it was going to change dramatically. Especially the Big Ten West is not the most dynamic division in all of college football. I could argue the Big 12 is significantly stronger than the Big Ten West as a whole, and it doesn't seem to have mattered. So to me, it's more about the program getting righted and the program righting the ship and getting in the right direction rather than who we've been playing year in and year out. And yes, when you play Ohio State, Michigan, and some of those schools, that's very, very tough. But, there's good teams in the Big 12. And again, the Big Ten West is not exactly a dynamo. So I don't look at our schedules or our conference or our division and be like, oh, that was our undoing. No, we got to right our own ship. We have probably the fourth most talented roster in the Big Ten, yet we're nowhere near the fourth best team right now.
Adam Carriker, it's Carriker Chronicles, Carriker Live, definitely right now. Look at the banner behind him, too, and the Big Ten Show. And again, Adam, want to make sure everybody can find you. So the best places are
Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Actually, we'll be launching a YouTube channel probably in the next 48 hours, hopefully, but definitely by the end of this week.
Adam, thanks so much for stopping by, giving us a lot of time. It was great stuff.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.